Hello, my dear listeners. I'm glad to welcome you to my channel. Thank you so much for the feedback and comments you leave after listening to the stories. I really enjoy reading them. Thank you so much. My God, who would have told me that at 70 I'd be crying over a man? Galina dabbed her puffy eyes with a napkin, crumpling it into a small damp ball. Can you imagine, Reed, just entering my 80s, and I'm sitting here like a snotty girl, suffering? I can totally imagine. Margarita resolutely pushed another napkin toward her friend and topped up her cup of fresh tea. And I'm telling you, you have every right to cry, but only today. Starting tomorrow, we start a new life. What new life? Quote. Galina looked up at her friend with tear-stained eyes. Not 70, Rit, 70. So what? Margarita shrugged. There's my neighbor upstairs. She's signed up for dance classes. And you're still a girl. The cozy kitchen in a typical two-room apartment was bathed in the sunlight of an early autumn morning. On the table, covered with a tablecloth embroidered with daisies, sat 2 cups of tea, a bowl of cookies, and a box of paper napkins, which had noticeably emptied in the last hour. Galina Petrovna sat, hunched over, mechanically twisting another wet napkin in her hands. Her best friend, Margarita, played the role of impromptu psychologist, a role she'd become accustomed to over the past 2 months. Ever since the day Viktor Andreevich, Galina's husband, packed his things and announced he was leaving for another woman. How much longer are you going to mourn? Margarita thoughtfully stirred her tea with a spoon. After all, she wasn't a girl anymore, not even a woman. She was of Balzac's age. You're 70, and you still suffer for your cable, which, by the way, is 3 years older than you. Margarita spoke without any ceremony, something only close friends could afford. She looked at her friend with concern. Listen, well, of course, I understand everything. Your case is special, and you react too, well, you're taking it way too personally. Have pity on yourself, Galka, at least a little. Yes, you need to feel sorry for yourself, Galina sighed, crumpling another napkin. You're right. Well, when I think about it, who could have imagined this? We celebrated our golden wedding last summer. 50 years, Rita, half a century, together our whole lives, since college. Galina fell silent for a moment, staring blankly out the window, where the wind swirled the first fallen leaves. And even if I never had any particular passion for him, we raised our caustic, helped our granddaughter Verochka get on her feet, helped the kids out of the apartment. We've been through so much together, and then out of the blue, my other Vidya disappeared. He's truly disgraced me. He disgraced himself first and foremost, not you. Margarita covered her friend's cold fingers with hers. What's your fault? Your whole life, like a squirrel in a wheel, home, work, grandchildren. You spent 35 years at school, teaching other people's children. She's an excellent housewife, a neat freak, a beauty, a smart woman. I'm shocked by your Vitenka. Margarita leaned closer and conspiratorially lowered her voice. Listen, maybe she's gotten used to him. No, seriously, what else can you think of? Out of the blue, the angry man took off and raced off into the sunset. Galina smiled mirthlessly. What the hell kind of love spells are we talking about at our age? We're old, Reed, grandparents. In our 80s. We get sick more and more often, our blood pressure fluctuates. Although my Vitenka, no longer mine, never suffered from high blood pressure. You remember how trim he always is. He runs in the mornings, rides his bikes along the embankment in the summer with his retired friends. And why shouldn't he be trim? Margarita snorted. With a wife like that, your house is always tidy, everything washed, cooked, ironed, and you've worked all your life, never lazed around on the couch. What can I say now? Galina wiped her eyes again, left and left. But now the neighbors are pointing fingers. Aunt Masha from the 5th floor whispered to her friend in the elevator yesterday, right in front of me, "That's the one whose husband left," as if I were deaf. And you give a damn what our local Sherlocks on the bench think, Margarita laughed. Calm down and live normally. But why don't you file for divorce? I don't understand. Margarita looked intently at her friend. Are you hoping he'll live with his sweetheart and come back? Yes. Galina sighed heavily. Quote, I don't know what to do either. I'm just so used to taking care of him that there's a void in the house now, and there's no one to talk to. Mirka the cat can only complain. And the worst thing is that this homewrecker Zenaida, your age and an old acquaintance. What a snake in the grass. Margarita threw up her hands. Why the hell would she need someone else's husband in her old age, when she herself lived alone for so many years after the divorce? It boggles the mind. Maybe out of boredom? Galina tried to smile. Or maybe dementia is already slowly setting in. But my dear, he's so good. He felt like an old Romeo and didn't even think about what would happen to him in a couple of years. Who would look after him, if anything happened? The friends continued to discuss the absurd story of Victor's departure from the family. He worked part-time as a security guard at the city pool in retirement. Galina and Victor's son, Konstantin, lived with his family in another city. He called his father, even visited and met with him at his mother's request, but he couldn't change anything. His father only coughed sheepishly and asked his son not to interfere in his personal life. Quote, Mom, I don't recognize my father, Konstantin later told his mother. He sat there, happy as an elephant, describing how he and Zina went to the theater and the pies she baked. I say to him, Dad, what about Mom? Half a century together, and he says to me, Son, I respect Galia, I always will, as the mother of my son. But for the first time in many years, I felt young again. Understand, son, I also want happiness. I have nothing against his happiness, Galina answered wearily. How can you just upend our entire life? 6 months passed. Galina heard rumors about her husband's happy life with his new common-law wife. In the end, she made up her mind and filed for divorce. The apartment remained with Galina, and her husband received a car, a garage, and a country house in the village. However, Victor was in no hurry to officially marry his new beloved. And Zina herself, it seemed, was in no hurry. Why are we in such a hurry, Vityusha? She said. He's not young anymore to rush headlong into the legislative assembly. Let's live like this for now, and then we'll see. Zenaida's character was strikingly different from that of his ex-wife, Victor. Galina was so calm and composed, quiet and modest, that sometimes her presence in the house was almost unnoticed. She could spend hours knitting or reading in her room, and Victor, thirsty for attention, would once again invite her for tea. And then his endless stories and monologues would begin, from which Galina grew a little tired, but never showed it. Now Zinachka listened with delight to her lover. She oohed and awed, admiring his ability to vividly describe what was happening. She served him hot borscht and his favorite cabbage pies. And next time, from pike with apples, Victor would hug Zenaida. I adore sweets too. If you do, I'll go to the theater with you to see that. What's his name? Chekhov, your favorite. He always loved active recreation in nature during the warm season. And this summer they often took Zina out to the forest to pick mushrooms, even biked to the dacha, to the village for 7 kilometers. And Galina, who adored her dacha, cried all summer. I wonder how my beds are doing. The peonies are probably blooming magnificently, she asked Margarita. And my beloved apple trees? Will there be a harvest this year? Enough, Galia, stop whining, Margarita told her sternly. I'll bring you some apples from my plot if they grow. Don't cry, let him manage there, and she too. I think your dacha now has free gardeners. I've forgotten how much I rubbed you with ointments when you were breaking your back in the beds. The summer turned out to be gloomy for Galina. The apartment was unusually quiet and empty. The only joy was her son. He began to come more often than usual, visiting his mother with his wife and daughter. It was obvious that they were trying not to let her become depressed. Galina held on with all her might and tried not to touch on the painful topic of her father's departure. Only once, when Constantine arrived alone, he asked his mother directly, "Mom, if Dad comes back, will you take him back? I think he's just experiencing, well, I don't know, a temporary loss of judgment, or something, and nothing more. What kind of love for a new flame can you have at that age? Total nonsense. Just some kind of mental breakdown." "I don't know," his mother answered quietly, running her hand over her son's shoulder. "Honestly, I don't know, caustic. I just don't even know how to say it." She praised him too much, fed him, caressed him. And so it's growing. And why does she need that? She must have gone crazy in her old age too. Most likely, her long-held dream of a family with a husband has finally come true. Well, let him rejoice. I've probably already resigned myself to it. And then this happened. One of the recent days, on another bike ride, Zenaida fell off her bike and broke her leg. At the hospital, they diagnosed a compound fracture. She spent a long time in traction, then painfully recovered, exercising her leg at home. Naturally, all the household chores instantly fell on Victor's shoulders. Zenaida's health seemed to have collapsed after that unfortunate fall. Gastritis, which she had never even thought about before, worsened. She could no longer lug heavy bags from the store and market and increasingly cook the simplest meals, not pampering herself or Victor with the abundance of salads, steamed cutlets, and homemade baked goods they had done at the beginning of their relationship. At first, Victor Andreevich heroically tried to cook himself, but eventually Zenaida began to manage the housework. However, now she rested more, visited doctors more often, and he began to feel somehow uncomfortable around her, as before. He increasingly longingly remembered Galina, her perfect order, pharmacy-like cleanliness, home comfort, and surprisingly calm nature. Zenaida remained affectionate and kind, but she needed much more attention and care. She never fully recovered from her injured leg and began walking with a noticeable limp. Hiking or cycling were now out of the question. Only a quiet, measured life with television, pills, and endless conversations about health. Victor visibly wilted. The apartment began to smell of medicine, and caring Zinachka began to support him with endless vitamins, finding imaginary ailments and treating them with her herbal teas and infusions, dragging him to doctors. Quote, "Vetiusha, you need to take your health more seriously," she would say, placing another serving of boiled fish on his plate. "At our age, you can't be so frivolous. Here, I wrote out a whole list of tests for you to take, and it wouldn't hurt to see a cardiologist for preventative purposes." "Oh, come on, Zin," Victor dismissed. "I'm healthy, I've been involved in sports my whole life, I run in the mornings. That's exactly it." "And I'm saying that too," Zenaida shook her head regretfully. "What the hell kind of running is this at 73? Think about it. What if my heart seizes up somewhere in the park? No, my dear, no jogging. Quiet walks, and only in good weather and not far from home." Victor felt increasingly cornered, constrained in his desires and habits. Zenaida tirelessly tried to examine him, treat him, and monitor his every step. He began to gain weight because the doctor had prescribed Xena rest, and she demanded that Victor stay home more, keep her company. Quote, the morning runs became shorter, and then they disappeared altogether. Where are you going so early? Zenaida read as he tried to rush out of the apartment at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's raining outside, you'll get wet, catch a cold, and who will take care of you then? I can barely drag my feet myself. And Victor, sighing, obediently took off his tracksuit and returned to bed. But you yourself said that you want care and attention, Zenaida reminded. So I take care of you. You're an ungrateful man. Quote, before, living with Galina, he often grumbled that his wife was too indifferent to his health. You only want me to move cabinets and carry potatoes from the dacha, he grumbled. And now he's been given so much care that it's enough to make you scream. One autumn day, Victor met Galina at the market. She looked at him, and surprise flashed in her eyes. She barely recognized her once fit, dashing husband, now plump, wearing some kind of ridiculous hat out of season, with a shopping cart filled with groceries. He amazed her with how quickly he had changed, not for the better. Galina herself had noticeably lost weight this year, partly due to worry about the divorce, but, oddly enough, she began to look younger. She even had to have her dresses and her old favorite coat taken in. She got a fashionable haircut at Margarita's insistence and even dyed her hair, getting rid of the gray hair. She also made a strict rule. When leaving the house, she must always put on light makeup. Galina Petrovna must look, so that when he meets her ex-husband, his eyes pop out of his head and his jaw drops to the pavement, Margarita would say as they picked out new clothes for a friend at the mall. And if that means cutting off a couple of centimeters from a skirt, then we'll take the scissors and hack away mercilessly. At my age, even short skirts are acceptable. Are you out of your mind? Galina would protest. But deep down, she liked the change. Quote, who's talking about miniskirts? Margarita retorted. But just above the knee, why not, with your legs? Do you know how many women at 45 look worse than you do at 70? We'll work with what we've got. As a result, Galina's wardrobe was completely updated, and with it, her posture, gait, even her gaze. She began to notice the approving glances men gave her on the street, and she was surprised, embarrassed, and secretly delighted. Neighbors who had recently whispered behind her back now greeted her with a special respect. Some even asked where she found such a beautiful blouse or shoes. Quote, you won't believe it, Galina told Margarita, how relationships change when you change yourself. Yesterday I ran into that gossip from the first floor, Claudia, in the courtyard. She stopped me and said with this look, I always knew your Victor was a fool, and now I'm completely convinced of it. You've simply blossomed, Galina Petrovna. And what did I tell you? Margarita smiled triumphantly. A man's best revenge is to become happy without him. And when Victor saw his ex-wife at the market, he froze with his mouth agape. Quote, Galia, is that really you? He couldn't think of anything smarter to say. Hello, Vidya, Galina smiled calmly. What, you didn't recognize her? Have you aged a lot? No, quite the opposite. Victor looked his ex-wife over from head to toe in confusion. You've become so different, you've lost weight, and you have a new hairstyle. And you, I see, are in perfect order, Galina continued, ignoring his questions. You've never helped me with my shopping like this. So, everything is going perfectly well for you, Zinachka. That's very good. Now at least I won't have to worry about you starving there. She adjusted her hair with a slight movement of her hand and walked on, without waiting for Victor's answer. And he continued to stare after her, unable to believe his eyes. He suddenly had a terrible urge to catch up with his Galia, grab her hand, take her somewhere to a quiet cafe and talk, ask about her son, granddaughter, and simply about how she lives alone. He, of course, would not tell her that he now cleans the apartment himself, carries groceries and runs to the pharmacy, because that Zinachka shouldn't lift heavy objects or overexert herself in any way. He wouldn't tell her he'd quit his job and that they were now skimping on literally everything because they needed money for treatment and the annual trip to a sanatorium, without which Zina allegedly simply wouldn't survive. He was ashamed to admit how much his life had changed. Zenaida constantly insisted that age was taking its toll, and sooner or later all elderly people would lead exactly this lifestyle, sitting at home and thinking only about their health. And that hiking, cycling, dancing, all that was just plain shabby and an unjustified risk for people over 70. You need to take care of yourself, stay closer to home, to your bed, to your pills. Lately, Victor had been increasingly beset by uninvited thoughts. He recalled his former life with Galina, their cozy home, quiet evenings over tea with cherry jam, trips to the dacha. He remembered how she never nagged him about his passion for sports, for his long walks, for his morning jogs. On the contrary, she was always supportive and proud that her husband was in such good shape. Quote, "But I once reproached her for paying too little attention to me," Victor thought, for always being busy with her notebooks, books, and knitting. Now I received so much attention that it made me want to howl. Comparing his two lives, his previous and current, he increasingly came to disappointing conclusions. But he didn't dare tell Zenaida about this. She was having a hard time after the injury. Besides, she sincerely cared for him, even if not in the way he would have liked. Maybe it's not Zina, but me, Victor mused, sitting in front of the TV in the evenings while Zenaida was already getting ready for bed in the bedroom. Maybe I'm just at that age when it's time to retire, forget about my sporting antics and live like all normal old people, quietly and peacefully. But meeting Galina stirred something old, almost forgotten, within him. Her slender figure, straight back, light gait. All of this reminded him that old age is a relative concept, and 70 is no reason to give up on yourself. Agalina walked briskly away from him down the street. She felt her ex-husband's gaze on her back, and she walked without turning around, tears treacherously welling up in her eyes, not from grief, but from some strange mixture of emotions, perhaps from pity. Whom did she pity more? Him, herself, she didn't even know. Lord, over half a century with the same person, she thought. 53 years, God, both of them. How could one not cherish such a past? But on the other hand, unexpected freedom, a new life had its charms too. In the last few months, she had accomplished so much she had never dreamed of before. She signed up for a computer literacy course for seniors, started going to the pool, created a social media account, and was now chatting with old friends all over the country. Returning home, Galina undressed, put on her favorite cozy robe and soft slippers, and called the cat. "Come on, my lazy girl, let's go to the kitchen, I brought you some of your favorite fish." "Enough sleeping, Sonia," quote. Mirka gracefully jumped off the chair and, tail raised high, walked into the kitchen. The cat devoured the fish with gusto, chomping heartily, while Galina sipped tea, looking out the window and thinking about her own business. Lord, grant us all health. Our whole big family, Vidya too. May everyone be happy and live as they wish, according to their own understanding. And as for me, just give me strength and peace. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, quote. Winter had arrived. One frosty December evening, there was a knock at Galina's door. She answered. Victor stood in the doorway with a small travel bag. Here, he said, without looking up. I'm back, if you'll accept me, of course. Galina silently looked at her husband's slumped shoulders, at his haggard face. Something akin to pity flickered in his eyes, but only for a moment. What about Zina? She asked, calmly. She went to Krasnodar to visit her sister, said the climate there suited her better. Victor was silent. And what did you suffer with me? Galina couldn't help but smile. Zenaida suffered with him for 6 months, and she endured 53 years. You see, Gal, I realized that I'll never be as happy with anyone as I am with you. Victor finally looked up. He was stupid, blind. He thought the grass was greener on the other side of the fence. Quote. Galina listened to him, leaning against the doorframe. It was strange, but she felt neither gloating nor triumph, only weariness and a certain finality. You see, she said the name softly, impeccably. It's not about Z or me. You yourself have changed. You felt yourself getting old, and you got scared. You wanted new emotions, new impressions. You thought that change would bring back the feeling of youth, but it doesn't work that way. I get it, Victor nodded. Now I understand. Forgive me, if you can. Galina looked at him thoughtfully, as if seeing him for the first time. You know, I've already forgiven you, she said finally, but I can't take you back. Not because I hold a grudge, it's just that I've changed. Apparently, over these months, I've learned to live differently, and I'm not any better off. But we lived together for half a century, Victor muttered, confused. That's precisely why, Galina nodded. All these years I lived for you, for my family, and now I want to live for myself. She told him she'd signed up for computer classes, went to the pool, started a social media account, and was now hanging out with her childhood friends from all over the country. Next year, she and Margarita were planning a trip to a sanatorium in Pyatagorsk. Quote, I don't hold a grudge, she added. We're not strangers. We can see each other and talk. Sergey and his family will be coming for New Year's. We'll celebrate together if you want, but it's better for us to live separately. Victor understood everything without further explanation, nodded silently, and turned toward the stairs. Where are you going now? Galina asked. To the dacha, Victor replied. There's a good stove there, and there's plenty of firewood. We'll survive the winter, and then we'll see. Good luck, Vidya. She lightly touched his shoulder. And be well. And you too, Galia, he replied quietly. After he left, Galina returned to the apartment, poured herself some tea, and called the cat. So, Mirka, are we going to live on? We will. The cat jumped onto her lap and purred loudly. Outside, snow was falling in thick flakes, blanketing the city in white. Another year was ending, but for the first time in a long time, Galina looked to the future without fear. She understood the most important thing. Age is just a number on a passport, nothing more. And at 70, life is only beginning.